Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Patrizia Morgante, the Officer for Communication UISG. There are also my colleagues here for the office, which will meet later on. This webinar that we really wanted to develop, and I want to thank my colleagues or the advocacy programs to develop it together, entitled Communicating from Event Planning Partners and Press, is another event in preparation to the international meeting of November, Communicating Religious Life. And why did we decide to organize this webinar? Because we often think that communication is just managing a website or social media. Actually, we communicate, we say who we are, what we do, even by means of the organization of an event. And since the advocacy project of UISG is very skilled in this topic, also by learning what not to do, we ask them to help us understand how we can communicate by means of an event organization, caring for all the aspects involved. Now, before we start, I would like to leave the floor to Sister Therese Rad because she is going to lead us in prayer. Thank you, Therese. Good morning, everyone. We will now start this meeting for today with a short quotation from the message of Pope Francis for the 15th World Day of Communication.
So I will be quoting in French. So I would like to follow in the lead of the Pope, and we make ourselves present to all this sharing. The key word, the catchword in this message being kindness. Kindness is not just a question of good manners, but a real antidote to cruelty, which unfortunately can poison hearts and poison relationships. So we need it in the media. We need kindness so that communication does not feed resentment that exasperates, generates anger, and leads to confrontation. Because kindness in communication helps people to reflect calmly, to decipher with a critical and always a respectful mind the reality in which they live. All it takes to express yourself well is love. Communication must never be reduced to an artifice, to a marketing strategy, but must be the reflection of the soul, the visible surface of a core of love invisible to the eye. We ask the Lord that He may open the eyes of our hearts to welcome, to give, to receive, to communicate the greatness of His love.
Grazie Therese per averci.
Thank you, Therese, for having reminded us about part of this very beautiful Pope's message. We just celebrated some days ago the World Communication Day, and talking with our heart is crucial. And starting with a prayer for us is not just because we are among sisters, but because it helps us to rediscover the meaning and the strategies of our communication, as well as our mission as communicators. So let us now enter the topic of our meeting. Our colleagues that Navoka is going to introduce us, Giulia and Eleonora, who is going to join us soon, will help us understand, even by some case studies, what does it mean to care our relationship with the press, with our partners, when we organize an event, how to nourish the relationship, and what are the details and the issues that we need to care for in order to organize an event that is really meaningful in its communication. So, as in every webinar, you will also find the recording and the materials of this webinar on our platform, which is communicating our mission, which we will put in our chat, but you can always reach it by our website, uisg.org. I will leave the floor now to my colleague Navoka, who are going to introduce us to Giulia and Eleonora, our speakers for today.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And I'm going to speak in English. And it's my pleasure to present and welcome two speakers, real experts in their fields, Giulia, Isabel, Cirillo, and Eleonora Insalaco. So I'll start with brief bio of Giulia. Giulia is the coordinator of the Sisters Advocating Globally, an initiative launched by the UISG to empower sisters in advocating for our planet and for its most marginalized communities. Giulia holds bachelor's degree in classics and master's degree in gender studies from the University of Cambridge. She has worked in many international organizations based in London, Malta, Spain, and Rome on various social and humanitarian issues such as women's rights, migration, and ecology. And since joining UISG in 2020, Giulia has combined her passions for education and communication by developing a range of training content focused on communicating for advocacy. Giulia, thank you so much for being here with us. And our second speaker, oh, she's here. Eleonora Insalaco. She is the partnership and research lead at the UISG Sisters Advocating Globally team. She also teaches at the University of Siena and is an international expert in intercultural affairs, Euro-Mediterranean relations, and project management in the field of education, research, youth, civil society, culture, and media. Eleonora was the head of operations and intercultural research at the Anna Lindh Foundation, where she worked as founding staff member for over 16 years. Eleonora is also the editor of 4 consecutive editions of Anna Lindh Report on Intercultural Trends in the Euro-Med region, and of the Anna Lindh Handbook on Intercultural Citizenship Education in the Euro-Med region. And more than that, she initiated online courses and digital games for intercultural education. And Eleonora, thank you so much for being with us. It's a pleasure to have you here. And without further ado, I leave you the floor. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Navoka, for the introduction. Good afternoon to everyone in our time zone, and good morning, good evening to everyone wherever you are. So I'm going to start us off for today with a brief introduction on Sisters Advocating Globally, the project at UISG that Eleonora and I are working on together. And then Eleonora will share a case study of communicating through an event. I'll share a few more conclusions at the end, but first I'll share my screen so that we can start talking about what it means to communicate through an event, particularly as is our case from the perspective of communicating for change. So I'm going to bring myself to full screen and hopefully a slideshow that you can all now see. Patrizia, you're smiling, so we take it we're good to go. So to very briefly repeat some of what Navoika has already said about sisters advocating globally. This project was launched in 2020 by UISG in partnership with an organization called the Global Solidarity Fund in July 2020, to be exact. So in the middle of the pandemic, which was also a kind of big defining element of the start of this project at UISG. And the objective of Sisters Advocating Globally is to harness, to channel the potential of UISG as an umbrella network that represents over 600,000 sisters. So as many of you will know, UISG as a membership organization represents approximately 1,900 superiors, and through their congregations, those superiors represent over 600,000 sisters, a huge network of Catholic sisters, many of whom, as of course you will know, are engaged in tackling some of the world's most pressing and most urgent development challenges. What do we mean by development challenges? Everything from poverty relief to access to education, to conflict resolution. We're talking about healthcare, anti-trafficking action, environmental protection, so many of the development challenges that UISG networks are known for engaging on. So the objective of this project is empowering sisters really to advocate on social and environmental justice. And we see that as being advocacy that happens for, on behalf of communities on the global margins, but also for and with, hand in hand with the communities that are served by sisters. How do we do this? So our objective is really to enhance the visibility, the recognition of the work of sisters, and to elevate the knowledge, the expertise, the wisdom that sisters hold to the level of decision-making, particularly policy-making, in order for that knowledge, for that wisdom to generate, to foster change that is sustainable for the long term, and that's systemic, that really addresses some of the root causes of today's most urgent challenges. So to briefly clarify what we mean by advocacy, to advocate by definition is to publicly support a particular cause or policy. And I think it's important to note here, for the purposes of today's webinar, that the only way we can really publicly support a cause or policy is to communicate about it. So by definition, advocacy and communication are two areas, as we've seen at UISG, that function very close to each other and that need to work hand in hand. There's also a spiritual dimension for us. So the Gospel of John describes the Holy Spirit as the advocate, or in other translations, the helper. And one of the things that we seek to do at UISG is embody the spiritual dimension of advocacy, which we understand as a powerful force to help others in creating positive change for themselves, for their families, for their communities, for their futures. There's also a broader context to this idea of advocacy, i.e. communication for change. So on the one hand, the advocacy work of UISG is rooted in the vision that has underpinned the social justice work of sisters for many centuries. And that's a vision that's based on the intrinsic dignity, the intrinsic value of all human people, and also, and this of course is an increasingly urgent topic, on the sacredness of our common home. At the same time, we're responsive to the urgency and to the challenges of our particular time and place. We see that Catholic sisters and their allies, their partners, belong to a global movement really that goes beyond the world of sisters, beyond the Catholic world, a global movement in the development space to shape conversations around the needs of local communities, because there's an increasing awareness that top-down approaches don't work, and that actually a grassroots-oriented response to global challenges is what's needed. So coming then to the theme of today's webinar, advocacy as communicating for change, and then we'll be looking specifically at how events can help us do that, to communicate for change. One of the things that we talk about a lot in the advocacy project at UISG is what type of change we're seeking to achieve, because this influences what type of communication we're using. So we have these 5 pillars, if you like, of communicating for advocacy, communicating for change. We want our change and therefore our communication, first of all, to be systemic. So one of the things that we're seeking to foster at UISG is a transition from a case-based approach to social justice work towards a more systemic approach. And what does that mean concretely? So in practice, it means that if a congregation, for example, is working to find safe term accommodation for migrant families arriving in its area, that's a case-based approach where family by family, the same work is being delivered to different people, to different groups again and again. But meeting, for example, with local authorities to discuss the need to legalize automatic, guaranteed housing provision for all migrants in the area for the future. That's an approach that says, actually, let's look at the systemic, the root cause of this problem and seek a sustainable solution, ultimately in order to eradicate the problem itself, rather than respond to it case by case. So that's one of the key tenets of advocacy at UISG, is its systemic focus. And that's how we want to communicate as well, with a focus on the systemic. Secondly, we're looking at empowerment. So we're talking about advocacy as giving people a hand up and not a handout. What we're seeking to do is support communities, well, support sisters to support communities to increase their capacity, for example, to access the services that they have a right to. We're working with a fantastic project in India at the moment that's supporting migrants to access opportunities to enter the workplace, for example. Those opportunities are available. They are made available by the Indian state, but migrant communities that the sisters work with often don't have the tools, don't have access, for example, to online communications in a way that allows them to make use of those services. And we're empowering people, we hope, in the long term to stand up for their own rights, essentially to advocate for themselves. The other three key pillars of our advocacy, of our communication, are these ideas of integral, integrative, and inclusive. So integral means from a place of integrity. One of the amazing examples that we're seeing all around us at the moment is that of congregations reviewing their own finances. So actually getting into some quite kind of complex financial and administrative processes to ensure that when they advocate, for example, for divestment from fossil fuels, or for the promotion of a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, they're doing so from a place of integrity. They are ensuring that their own investments, that their own portfolios are not financing the extraction of fossil fuels. Integrative means that we're looking at building bridges, bringing people together and focusing on our shared humanity and future. And I was thinking of this just a moment ago, as Sister Perez was saying, we need kindness in media. That was Pope Francis' quote, which I really was kind of thinking fits this concept that we're seeking to promote of communication as a way of finding common ground. And finally, we want our communication as well to be inclusive, leaving no one behind, embracing vulnerability as a value of leadership, and knowing that often the communities with least opportunity to speak up, the communities that are most marginalized, can actually teach us the solutions and the resilience that we need at a time of great global challenges. So, as advocates, and therefore as communicators for change, how do we use events? Because that really brings us to the crux of today's webinar. So the three core objectives for our project at UISG all respond in some way to kind of the same imperatives. So our three objectives are to create spaces for dialogue on issues of global development that are convened by women religious and participated by Catholic, interreligious, and secular partners. Secondly, to improve recognition for the work of women religious and enhance the public perception of sisters as key players in realizing the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And thirdly, to build the capacity of sisters in advocacy and communication. So Creating spaces for dialogue, well, the events that we organize as Sisters Advocating Globally are intended as such, as spaces for dialogue, as spaces to open up conversational platforms. Of course, within those conversational platforms, one of the things that we're seeking to do is improve recognition of the work that women religious are doing at the grassroots and enhance the public perception of sisters, not just as grassroots kind of community service actors on the ground, but also as voices in global decision-making processes and a kind of a key voice in the realization of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And finally, we see that events are also a wonderful opportunity to build capacity in advocacy and communication, because as we all know, public speaking is nerve-wracking and meeting new people is nerve-wracking. And all of these skills that we're able to build through events for ourselves and for sisters in the UISG network are then valuable to us as advocates as we go forward. So after that introduction, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Eleonora, who is going to share a concrete example of an event that we ran recently, a case study of UISG's sister-led dialogues. Eleonora, over to you.
Grazie Giulia.
Thank you, Giulia.
Buon pomeriggio.
Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I'm going to speak in Italian. Now, I'm not good as Giulia with technology, but I'll do my best. So, I actually developed over the years a long expertise in the creation of partnerships and promoting international dialogue. And I also had the privilege of working with UISG and with Giulia for the program Sisters Advocating Globally ever since last July. And this has been really an enriching experience for me and something with which I try to share what I learned during my professional path over the last few years. And so this afternoon, we have the opportunity of talking about partnerships and even events as a tool for advocacy and for the promotion of a systemic change. As Giulia was saying, with our program, Sisters Advocating Globally, we aim at helping sisters of UISG to promote what we call systemic change together with the various communities with which you all collaborate. We would also like to offer an opportunity to our sisters to speak up and to be listened to at the international level. Not only so as to promote your vision, but also to be yourself promoters of the vision and of the needs of the communities with which are constantly realizing how much richness, how many messages and needs you know. However, this needs and this voice of the communities with which you collaborate is not really heard at the international level. And so as a team of Sisters Advocating Globally, we would like to pinpoint some institutions, also international ones, but also social organizations and religious organizations that may help us to open up new platforms and dialogue spaces in which, as UISG, sisters that are committed in various sectors of sustainable development may really speak up and make your voice and the voice of your communities be heard. The creation of partnerships is crucial to this end because the change for which we all advocate are very important ones. And these are changes that cannot really be reached alone. Hence the importance of collaborating with various stakeholders, specialized in various sectors, but with whom we all need to aim at the same objective. So the collaboration with different partners may help us, for example, in the creation of policies or even to enforce the already existing policies. So how does a partnership work? A partnership starts from pinpointing and analyzing a given context and by sharing the common objectives of the various partners and developing a strategy to reach them. As I was saying, in a partnership, it is important to have actors that all contribute to the goal and are specialized in various skills so that together we can all contribute with our own expertise and we can most effectively reach our goals. It is also important to have a written agreement among partners where you have defined your goals, the way in which you want these goals to be reached, above all, if we're talking about international partnerships or long-term partnerships. In my personal experience, partnerships often are created when we do something together. So the organizations know each other, and by working together on a
nello scopo proprio
objective,
per creare anche un senso di
and
fiducia reciproca, ma nel momento in cui ci si rende conto che insieme si può fare qualcosa di più grande,
you can do even something greater, this agreement may be useful to have a formal basis of agreement. So here we define our objectives, our working methodology, our governance tools in the partnership. We define so how decisions are going to be made in the partnership itself, what are the funding sources, be them external or internal, what are the tools for communication between the partners and how we want to communicate in the external world and now we want to monitor the whole project to check how the partnership is going and to also check for eventual changes or amendments. What are the basic elements of a partnership? Most certainly equality among members. This doesn't mean that all partners in a partnership will have the same role or the same decision-making power, but all members have the same value in the partnership itself. It is also important that all actors, all people joining to address a problem or to manage an event have a strong sense of belonging and identify with the partnership, because only with a sense of belonging and individual responsibility will we really be involved in a partnership and will we make our best to work for partnership. We need to have a regular communication schedule, and we also need partners not to impose decisions on the others. Consensus is crucial both for small and very important decisions. Our collaboration may take place at the local or international or national level, but this doesn't really matter. These principles are crucial for every kind of communication. And in any way, we need to always remember that partnerships are based on the relationships existing between members as institutions. They join in the partnership, but institutions are represented by people. And over these last 20 years, I could work at the international level, and I realized that there are interpersonal relationships working on partnerships, and these are what really influence the success or the failure of a program. This is a collaboration in which the human element is crucial. And so, if on the one hand it is true that in a partnership, we do have a written agreement in which we agree on rules and working methods. On the other hand, it is also true that active communication and professional and also fair relationships among members and representatives of the organizations are crucial to ensure the success of the partnership itself. Every change, for example, if a representative of an organization is going to be replaced by one another, this could put the life of the partnership at a risk, because we need to identify our partnership as a human relationship. By changing the members, we could also change our working methods. What do we need for a partnership? First of all, preparation, understanding the context and the needs where we are working and upon which we want to have an impact, what we would like to change, how we would like to help the community for which we are advocating, and then the identification of the necessary actions and partners and their roles. Often we will have a written agreement or a formal agreement. We will need to define a working program, which is going to be well detailed with objectives, results, assessment, schedules for goals reaching, and also measures for internal and external communication. And as we were also saying, we will also need a lot of clarity and awareness from every partner concerning their role. What about external communication? External communication is crucial to give visibility to our work, to give visibility to our results, and also to be given financial or political support, which prove crucial in many cases to continue working with our initiatives. At the level of communication, we will have communication on the part of partners. So all the measures that are going to be defined during the planning will be part of external communication. But another important factor is the communication from the donors and from people who will benefit from these projects. They are our soundbox for the importance of our partnerships. What about communications tools? There are many actually, and Giulia will tell you more about it later on. But
Puoi rallentare un pochino il
Eleonora,
ritmo?
would you please slow down? Sure. Thank
Scusa,
you.
cara.
Thank you very much.
Dicevo, nel mondo
So in our modern world, though we have many communication tools available, it is often good to deploy them all together, maybe in different moments in time, but to have an integrated communication strategies. So working on the web, on social media, also on the email as a more traditional system with press conferences, as well as for organization of workshops.
L'evento, andando anche alla sostanza di questo
So going to the core of our webinar, we can say that an event is a very important moment to develop a stronger relationship with our partners and also to give visibility to what we have been promoting. And in events can have many forms, but what really matters is the sharing and involvement of partners and participants to the meeting. What are the 7 main components for the organization of an event? The activity of our event, the place where it will take place, how long will it last, the people involved and how they will be involved in the various stages of the organization and implementation and assessment of the event. What are the resources we will have available from a financial point of view for our event, and also what are the communication measures that we are going to deploy to give visibility to our activity. To ensure the success of an event, it is crucial to plan in advance all the stages of our event. And we will need also to create a sort of task force, a group of people who may work for various tasks and contribute to the success of the initiative. We will have people, for example, working in the field of communication. Others will work on the various places where the event will take place. Others will care for the financial dimension of the event. Others instead will work in developing the program. And above all, it is very important to have a coordinator for this task force in order to monitor how the whole project is going on. What is the first step to organize an event? It is the drafting of what we call a concept. A concept is a document, actually, that will need to be approved in the organization and that includes the main issues of our event. So what do we have in a concept? We will have the objectives and goals of our event. We will find our stakeholders, participants, and those who will benefit from the event, how long the event will last and the dates in which it will take place, the place, and above all, the topic. The topic that we want to propose for our activity, which may be unique in our working schedule compared to what we normally do, and even the format. So how our program, if we are developing a roundtable or a workshop, how do we want to structure the day or the 2 days of the event? This is what we define by format. For example, formats formats are linked to how many speakers we will have in an event, and also to many other tools and factors. We also wanted to share with you the example of one of the most recent events we organized, which are called the first sister-led dialogue concerning the environment, and has a team of sisters advocating globally. In 2023, we have been organizing many sister-led dialogues with various expertise and concerning many topics. So the first dialogue took place last April, and these sister-led dialogues, even by definition in our concept, are really crucial. And we really wanted to say that in this dialogue, the sisters are the one who lead practically the conversation. So sisters are the coordinators and facilitators of this dialogue together with various stakeholders that all want to contribute to the topic. And in this case, we are talking about environmental topic. So the goal of sister-led dialogues are the discussion of crucial topic. So pinpointing support measures, reflecting on key questions for sustainable development, and how to respond to the needs of the most marginalized people, and also to create a coalition of people and institutions that want to contribute to sustainable development for the communities. So these are the three main goals of our program. For our first dialogue in April, we had environment as a main topic and the needs and challenges of the most vulnerable people hit by climate change, pollution, and loss of biodiversity. In 2023, coming from 2022 with COP27 and many important international measures as far as sustainable development and ecology are concerned, we as Sisters Advocating Globally had already published on November the 3rd, 2022, the statement Sisters for the Environment, which is a statement in which we defined the three main pillars for the promotion, for sustainable promotion in the environmental issue. So we organized this first dialogue concerning three main topics. So first of all, integrating the responses to climate change and to loss of biodiversity, showing the link existing between the two factors, climate change and loss of biodiversity, integrating the care for people and for our planet, highlighting how the actions that are made by people actually impact our environment. And thirdly, integrating vulnerability in decision-making processes. So vulnerability in national and international leadership is crucial. So as for the format,
di una giornata con 4 sessioni che si è svolto a Roma con 24 partecipanti che rappresentavano diverse categorie con le quali
several categories with which we intertwine relationships to create this coalition. So we invited representatives from the Vatican institutions, from international organizations, from the civil society, from the academia, and from the press to discuss all together with sisters about the environmental issue. What were the results we hoped for? With this event, we wanted to create new collaborations, something that we also started during and thanks to this event. We wanted to publish a policy brief with some recommendations concerning the environmental issue and also with what we listened from the various participants and had a first exchange of ideas for the preparation of the forum advocacy UISG for 2023. So as for the moment, we are actually quite satisfied with the results we achieved because with this event in April, we achieved these results. So this is very briefly the agenda of our event of April the 17th. And what about the participants? We had sisters, Vatican representatives, ambassadors, Studio Odyssey, international institutions, religious and non-religious organizations, academia, and press.
Quindi questi elementi sono gli elementi che noi
So these are the main elements that we included in our concept that, as we said, it had to be approved internally by UISG to then be implemented in our organization. After the approval of the concept, we analyzed the feasibility of our program based on the resources we had available. And once we analyzed the feasibility of the project, we started planning the activities with a calendar of everything that we needed to do and with some assessments in the long term. We also defined our communication tools to be used and we started inviting participants. And as for the logistic aspect, we started booking the the services we had to offer. So for example, the travel expenses, the hospitality expenses to help those who needed visas and so on. And we also defined in detail our program with some briefings, with some regular briefings with our speakers and participants to the event. At the end of the event, we carried out an assessment, an internal assessment and external assessment, to also understand if we had to change anything and what we had learned from the organization of this event and what we had to change for further events. So the assessment is the last phase of the event organization to decide about the next events. So I really want to thank you for your attention, and I'm giving the floor to Giulia.
Thanks, Eleonora. Thank you so much for sharing all of that, I think, really kind of revealing detail on what it takes to create an event. I think one thing that I wanted to add for our webinar participants today is that, you know, our objective with this presentation was to share some of the key elements that constitute the preparation of an event. And it's true that preparing an event can be complex in some ways, both in terms of kind of conceptualizing what we're trying to achieve and in terms of realizing the partnership building and then the logistics and then the kind of realization of the event in itself. But on the other side, I also want to say that actually events can be much more straightforward and much simpler than the example that we shared today. And I think that's something I want to highlight, just because our objective today is to really encourage you in making this tool your own. So really encourage you to see events as a tool that you have in your communicational tool belt and something that you can use with the resources that you have available to create a space for dialogue, a space for partnership building. So our event had a certain set of objectives. Those objectives were ambitious, and therefore the event itself was somewhat ambitious. It took place over a full day, you know, with a consistent number of participants. But actually, an event can be something as simple as a coffee morning, you know, inviting a few key stakeholders, a few key partners to speak with you at wherever your offices are or wherever your work is located. So I think we wanted to look at as much detail as possible, but it's important also to kind of share and encourage everyone to feel that events can happen on whatever scale works for you based on your resources and your objectives. So I know we want to leave plenty of time for questions. I'm going to conclude very briefly with a few more minutes, just looking at kind of some of those reflections after the event. As Eleonora mentioned, after our event in April, there was kind of an intensive process of looking at what we've learned, what objectives were achieved. So just to kind of very quickly share what we think are some of the results of that event and of that approach, if you like, to events as a tool for communication. I'm going to put myself on to slideshow mode once again. Hopefully you can all see me now. So what are the results that we feel were achieved by hosting an event at UISG? Well, really two types of results, if you like. One type of results is about learning and information sharing, I would say. So certainly two things that were achieved were bringing new partners into the UISG network on an institutional level. So to learn about UISG as an organization. And this, if you like, is the institutional/global level. As an organization that represents a worldwide network, we're trying to share our knowledge, share our perspective with partners. And then there's the learning that happens as we engage global representatives in finding out more about the impact of sisters on a local level. That's one of the kind of key values of UISG, linking global to local. And we know that it's one of the key potential values of many congregations as well, because we know how congregations can connect the local to the global. And then the other type of objective achieved is about networking, if you like, and relationship building. So we were able to create a space that was convened and led and shaped by sisters on their own terms. So in a sense, the sister-led dialogue was a dialogue with sisters, where partners were coming into our space to dialogue with us. But we were also able to demonstrate the potential of sisters to build bridges between different actors. So this was a dialogue with sisters, and it was also a dialogue, if you like, under the umbrella of kindness and goodwill that sisters are so often and so uniquely able to create. So one of the really interesting things that we hadn't necessarily expected was how much people were coming into kind of very open, very lively conversation with each other about different points of view. And that was a real kind of added bonus. So when we're building these relationships, as I was saying, what are kind of the key elements that we have in mind? We're looking to create a space that feels professional and purposeful. You know, it's not just a chat for the sake of a chat. It has objectives, and we want it to be impactful. But at the same time, and this is sometimes a difficult balance to strike, we're seeking to hold space for interactions that are sincere and accessible. We're not trying to create a space that's so professional it becomes difficult to access, and unpretentious as well. Interactions that, as Eleonora was saying, bring together institutions to speak to each other on an organizational level, but also rely on human-to-human, person-to-person relationship building. And then the other key element as we build relationships is this idea of recognizing the value of each participant and their contribution to the dialogue, which is unique and special. And therefore, as we communicate on our event, ensuring a fair and equal representation of different points of view. So this is something that can be applicable on a concrete level. That's as simple as thinking about how many posts are we planning on social media? And are we making sure that if there are 24 speakers, each one of them will have a quote shared in the same way? Because sometimes we can revert to hierarchies, or we can revert to stereotypes. Unthinkingly, we can assume perhaps that some voices need to be shared louder than others, and to think consciously about how we communicate on events to ensure that the voices of all participants are equally represented is particularly important for us in partnership building. So a few of the results that I wanted to highlight for us are around kind of policy making and building credibility. As we've said, one of our key objectives is really enhancing the perception of sisters as key voices in the development space. So as Eleonora mentioned, alongside our events, we've been building a program of publications that express the perspective of sisters. And I think reflecting on how events go hand in hand with the written content that we might produce, with kind of written evidence, with, again, other communication tools, is really important for a holistic approach. So in November last year, we published our first statement on the environment, Sisters for the Environment. That was in November 2022. Then we published an article by Sister Mamalifa, who many of you will know is the new coordinator of UISG's environmental network, Sowing Hope for the Planet, which is on implementing outcomes of COP15. And then we've published a policy brief, so 9 recommendations for environmental sustainability that emerged from our event, from our sister-led dialogue in April. And as we go forward towards the rest of this year, and of course, the key talks that will be happening at the upcoming COP28, we're also looking at how these materials can be used as part of the Holy See's efforts to build a coalition towards the next COPs. And then alongside the kind of policy content production, there's also the question of producing content for more public consumption, and of course for media consumption as well, so the public and the press. Two things that I have to admit were rather fortuitous accidents for us, were coinciding roughly with the date of our event, which was the 17th of April, close to Earth Day, which is April 22nd, and then the publication of our policy brief with Laudato Si Week, which started on May 21st. I would love to say that this was part of a calendarization strategy, and it definitely should be part of a calendarization strategy. So I would encourage you to think about, you know, the topics that your events might be dealing with and whether there are any moments of global significance that those topics can be tied to. From our point of view, what was successful about both the event and the policy brief launch was some of the media attention that was generated, so as well as Osservatore Romano, Vatican News, the Catholic Italian TV station TV 2000, and also, which I forgot to list here, Avvenire. So some of the kind of press platforms that are already interested in the work of sisters. We had the opportunity as well to take part in a radio program on Rai Radio 2 and to kind of have a conversation with secular journalists who don't know about the work of sisters and who were hearing about kind of the work of Catholic sisters on environmental issues for the first time. So just two more things really, and then I'll conclude because I know we're coming up to question time. One of the key learnings for us was the value of events in fostering reciprocity, i.e. in creating opportunities for essentially mutual involvement, mutual participation. So we've already kind of seen how our event in April has developed a range of other opportunities. We have a couple of events coming up in June where sisters or kind of members of the team have been invited to speak on development issues, which is a kind of wonderful initial result showing that potential for reciprocity. Then we've had an opportunity for sisters to receive training through the UN's Environment Programme and specifically its Faith for Earth initiative. So a key point to highlight is events can lead to other event opportunities, but they can also lead to other types of opportunities like training. And then we have ongoing or potential collaborations with the International Organization for Migration towards our upcoming events in the rest of the year. So a second sister-led dialogue and our annual advocacy forum, and as well a potential collaboration with the Italian Special Envoy for freedom of religious belief and interreligious dialogue on a more kind of policy and fundraising oriented area. And for us, this sense of the reciprocity that's generated by events culminates in the question of, once we've run an event, what are we doing to close that circle? So to ensure that each event is part of a virtuous cycle of increasing visibility or impact or partnership building, whatever it is that we're trying to achieve. So from our point of view, I wanted to mention some of the things that we're going to be doing kind of in the next part of the year. Certainly looking at kind of what our own vision is. So we're going to be looking at different global spaces, regional platforms, and opportunities for national impact as well. So nationally, regionally, and globally, what are the type of events that we want to be involved in to achieve the impact that we seek? And how do we make sure as well that the sisters who are involved in collaborating with UISG projects continue to be involved and kind of continue to have their capacity built and their potential maximized? And then I guess I just wanted to highlight very finally these three key points. So this idea of hosting, participation, and accreditation. So for us, closing the circle of generating an impact through events is about looking at what events we host as spaces that we kind of convene and lead, what opportunities for participation we can kind of seize in a way that's strategic. So thinking about what partnerships we want to build, and then as well, where it becomes useful to be accredited as part of an institutionalized body, whether that's at the UN or as part of kind of other global coalitions, i.e. where we might want to formalize a partnership kind of for the longer term. I think that's all from us for today. So thank you very much for having us.
Wow. I don't know how, non so come si sentono così tutte le partecipanti, ma io
I
mi
don't
sento
know how participants feel, but I feel wow. And how much professionality is behind an organization of event. And as you were saying, Giulia, we must not be discouraged, and probably there are also words that are not very clear for some of us. And so I would like to invite sisters to ask for clarification if necessary, and maybe write it in the chat, and you can maybe answer their questions, maybe even using some synonyms, because it is something that is more familiar to you that are very accustomed in the skills. But thank you, Giulia and Eleonora, because we really want to understand how to organize events. And in congregations, it is crucial to organize events. Just think about the memorials of founders or foundresses, but these are things that currently need to be done in such a way to involve the public. So very well, I have many questions actually, but I would like to give a moment of silence also to help the interpreters to breathe after this full immersion. We will have 1 minute of break, but just to look through our notes. And if we want to ask questions, we can take the advantage of the presence of Eleonora and Giulia. And you will also have the possibility of listening again to this webinar, and you will be able to take notes. But we now can ask for some questions. You can either write them in the chat, or we can give you the floor live. We have some minutes to do that. And in order to take the floor, you need to ask you need to raise your hand with the reactions. And so we will now have a minute of break to breathe, to drink a glass of water, and be back on board. Thank you.
Io non vedo Eleonora, non so se è ancora con noi, sì, ecco qui, la
I
aggiungiamo.
don't see Eleonora anymore, so we will have her now. So I would like to see if there are questions before I ask mine. And so let's see if there are questions from the sisters listening to us. You can write your questions in the chat, or you can just take the floor. You can open your microphones. I will give you the possibility of opening your microphones to take the floor.
Perhaps, Patrizia, I could start by answering one of the questions in the chat, which is about how to communicate with elderly sisters and with young people at the same time. And I think I want to answer this question because it really touches on a broader topic, which is what do we do when we are communicating with different audiences simultaneously and through the same event or through the same moment, through the same kind of activation. So one of the things that I want to mention is that distinguishing the type of audiences that we're seeking to reach is really key to the success of any communicational activity, and particularly of organizing an event as a form of communication. So I think the first question that I would ask would be, with relevance to this particular example, what event do we envisage that is trying to communicate both with elderly sisters and with young people? Perhaps those two things are not the same event. Perhaps we do need separate channels, separate streams, separate moments. So sometimes I think the answer is as simple as saying, actually, if we have two very diverse audiences, they need attention in different ways. They can both be target audiences, but they need sometimes to be separated. If we're bringing them together, and it might be that we're bringing them together because perhaps we want to bring elderly sisters in dialogue with young people, then I think we need to ask ourselves, what are we providing within the particular activity or the particular event that meets the needs of each group? I've seen some really wonderful initiatives recently on Instagram where a group of sisters was organizing a fun run, and this fun run was for elderly sisters and young people. And what they did was they had a race that young people were taking part in, and many of these young people were kind of pushing elderly sisters in a wheelchair. And so there really was that kind of joint participation in an activity that perhaps the sisters would not have been able to join on their own. But the young people came together with the sisters to be able to do something kind of participatively. So I think we just need to think specifically, is this a case for separating our audiences, or are we bringing them together in a defined, in a targeted way?
Grazie Giulia, mi permetto adesso di prenderci uno spazio un po'
Thank you, Giulia. I would like now to read some questions from the chat. I will just read them through for Giulia and Eleonora, and then I will leave you some space to try to understand, maybe not to all questions, but to give us your reflections. So I will ask you to take some notes. Some questions actually are here in the chat, but I would be really glad to hear someone directly asking her question. So your microphones are potentially open. So if you want, you can take the floor. So a question that seems quite interesting to me is a mixed online and on-live event. What are the characteristics? How to organize it? This is the first question. Another question is, this is quite general, how to effectively communicate our identity as a congregation, but this is something that I believe is more linked to communication than to today's topic, but then we will see if they are going to answer this question. Here someone asks about possible indications on how to develop the goals of an event so as for them not to be too general. I would like to add some other questions, waiting for someone else to write in the chat. And I have two questions. What kind of skills do we need? What kind of team do we need to organize a successful event? And my second question for you is, what are the first steps that you make when you are still developing, dreaming about the event? What are the first steps that you make? Now, I would give 5 minutes to Giulia and 5 minutes to Eleonora to give us some ideas without the idea of concluding everything. But so the floor is yours.
So I think I wanted to start actually from the last question that I've seen, this question of how to formulate objectives so that they're not too broad or too ambitious. Sometimes you feel that you have your objectives clear, and then it turns out afterwards that it wasn't the case. I think what I want to highlight here is just that with events, practice makes perfect. You will find that there are learnings after every event. There are always situations where you think, oh, I should have done that. And it seems so obvious afterwards. And you just have to go again. Try it again the next time, see what you've learned, what you can incorporate, what improves. So I think the short answer is it's very difficult without kind of repeated practice to get it all right. I think in terms of creating objectives that are realistic, it's about testing them against realization. You know, you can have a set of objectives, but are you mentally preparing for what they will look like in action? Another question that I wanted to address, I think it's come up a couple of times actually, is this idea of resistance to change. I'm seeing someone asking about sisters resisting the idea that training has changed, and someone else asking about kind of interacting with sisters who feel that they are experts perhaps, that they have their usual ways of doing things. So I think as we've kind of experienced in our own work at UISG, because certainly, you know, we're a complex institution with lots of different networks functioning in their own established ways. One of the things that we've experienced as helpful is focusing on what we can offer. So on what capacity we can add, focusing on really the question of, you know, what do we bring to the table? Because I think it's harder for people to reject our support if they feel like really we're just, you know, coming with a gift, coming with a kind of additional something that they are free to use or not use. I think sometimes trying to create change by giving advice or by kind of phrasing it concretely as training to develop, you know, a different way of doing things can be oppositional, because it makes people feel like, you know, if I need to change the way I was doing things, then obviously I wasn't doing things the right way. But sometimes it's just a case of saying, love what you're doing. How about this? Would you like to do this too? I find a little bit of kind of affirmation goes a long way before suggesting a change. I hope that's helpful. And I think I'll leave the more kind of technical questions for Eleonora with regard to how we prepare events. Oh, just one thing, team building. I mean, just want to say for us, it's been a whole journey. I was doing this on my own 2 years ago. And then I started doing it with Eleonora, which was a wonderful, wonderful addition to our capacity to deliver events. And now we have a third team member as well, helping us on events with administration and logistics. So at the moment, we're structured in that way, where we have a kind of coordination role for the global delivery of a kind of vision that events are one part of. And then we have Eleonora's expertise on partnerships and events specifically. And then we have administrative support. And I would say that's really, we're finding the minimum for our kind of level of objectives. Eleonora, over to you.
Grazie per queste belle domande.
Thank you for these very interesting questions, and they are really enriching to me. I was thinking about the question concerning what kind of team do we need to organize an event. And I believe that a successful event is the one where everything looks natural, as if, well, behind the event, there is a huge and excellent preparation, and so it is something that it is not apparent outside. We need a team of professionals. An international event cannot be something that we can improvise. We need to plan every single small detail and organize it in detail, because during the event itself, there are always things that happen unexpectedly, and these are things that we can either manage during the event itself, but we also need to minimize the risk of such events. We want to offer people a perfectly planned table. Think about a dinner where dishes have been carefully prepared, the table has been decorated carefully, and there is a nice atmosphere going on, thanks to which our guests will be able to pleasantly talk and chat, and they will be able to get to know each other. They will be able to exchange ideas. This is the vision that we want to offer in our events, and this is our approach when organizing an event. In practice, this means that apart from the members, as Giulia said, of our team, we need to have also external professionals to ensure that every aspect of our organization be very detailed care for. So Giulia cares for the coordination of the activities and about the communication with UISG leadership and with sisters that are involved in our events. I personally work in the relationships with new partners, with new organizations that we try to, first of all, show UISG work and to involve them in the activities that we have been organizing. Isam, who is one of our colleagues, works in the logistics, so hoteleries and visas and dinners and lunches. But we also have in our team a communication agency that helps us in the production of all the visible products of our events. For example, in the setting of our event, for the content on social media, and also in the relationship with the press. And in UISG, we have been collaborating with the communication office together with Patrizia and with the financial department.
Tanti membri, ecco, del team che devono essere coordinati per la buona riuscita della nostra cena, del nostro pranzo. Quindi una preparazione proprio nei minimi
So a
dettagli.
careful preparation is necessary. And you, Patrizia, were asking about the first steps that we need when we prepare an event. So the first one is research, in my opinion, research on the topic. I usually try to check the existing documents concerning the topic, what UISG and other social or Vatican organizations have already done concerning this topic. And so what would an extra element be added would be. And apart from that, I try to imagine what is going to happen for an event of one day. I will try to imagine my agenda, people coming, and what would it be interesting to see happening over the day. I will try to take notes, and from there, I will try to define all the necessary elements. It is actually an opposite work. It is a down top approach, but I will try also in this way to analyze what are the best solutions, for example, for um, for the final results or the conversation between the partners. And last part, how to combine offline and online meetings. We also had this reality increasingly after COVID-19. And even in our last event in on April 17th, we had most participants in Rome and one or two representatives who wanted to join from abroad. This is something that really enriches our event. And facilitating participation from abroad is crucial. And we also try to put in a specific moment in our agenda the interventions, people speaking from abroad. We had people joining from abroad during the first session, and we tried to put them all in the first session. We noticed that people from Zoom, from online, would have become tired and wouldn't be able to participate in the whole day meeting on the screen. And we thought they were just to participate in the first half of the day. Instead, we had participants participating all day long, and we also tried to give them the floor during the various stages of our meeting. Thank you, Eleonora and Giulia. And so I see a question which I ask you not to answer today, but I believe this is a question for your mission of advocacy. Sister talked about the difficulty of partnership with governments in countries where there are very uh, strict or menacing laws or institutions working in advocacy? This is a question that I will give to you for another reflection point. Now I see Sister Sophia with a hand raised, and we will let her very shortly. Please, Ana Sofia, introduce yourself.
Buenas tardes.
Good morning and good evening to you all. I had a question similar to Patricia. I am from Colombia. We are called in Italiano Francescane Ancelle di Maria. And the question I have concretely is, we will be organizing an event on volunteering, which is entitled Adoring to Donate, which in Spanish is more poetic, but then it's about getting funds also for promoting spiritual growth. So how can we somehow promote those events? So for those events where you're trying to get funds, but also as an objective for spiritual growth, how can you offer that? How can you promote that? Because we have a specific need where we are, and that would be also the best place where for people could just come to get some spiritual accompaniment. So I don't know how that could help.
Giulia Eleonora, muy brevemente.
Thank you, Giulia Eleonora. Just very briefly, 2 minutes if you can answer.
I will reply in English just so as to keep it simple for the translators. But I think two key things I wanted to highlight. One is about flexibility. So always, the work that sisters do as they kind of tackle these development challenges is about maintaining a strong base of identity, particularly when it comes to the spirituality of our action, and yet at the same time communicating in new ways to generate new impacts with new audiences. So I think one of the key things is about saying, are we really asking ourselves, how flexible can we be? You know, we want to communicate our identity as a congregation, for example. So how can we explain that, phrase that in a way that is comprehensible, that makes sense, that is useful to the new audiences that we want to engage? So my two key points would be one, flexibility, and two, I think similarly to what we were saying before, the question that I'm asking is, who are the two audiences? To think about it in terms of people, actually. So who do we want to fundraise from, and who are we trying to inform about our identity as a congregation? Are they the same people? Are they slightly different people? Is it two parts of the same process? One thing comes first and then the other. First we share our identity and then we fundraise. So I think as much as possible, breaking it down into smaller components is what's helpful.
Ok, scusate.
Okay, beg your pardon. I believe that when you organize a fundraising activity, when we look for funds for projects or initiatives, we always need to focus on our uniqueness. Our funders want to fund a congregation or an activity that is sister-led, and so the spiritual element is crucial, and it is what makes the difference between various requests for fundraising. If, for example, it was an NGO which asked for funding, I don't see an imbalance between these two goals. Crucial is to be very clear in what we want to go, what we want to do with these fundings, and this is crucial for the funder. So we need to be very clear in our goals, what are the needs of the community that we want to help, or what are the problems that we want to relieve. And it is always crucial, I believe, to focus on the spiritual element. This is what makes the difference between a religious congregation and other organizations making the same request. And in our world where we are competitors in the organization of events and funding requests, I believe it is very important to focus on our identity to be a plus in having funds. And I'm speaking about sisters also compared to other religious organizations or other people in the church. I believe there is an inner value that we want to promote, that is religious women committed to bring about change in the social sphere. This is what I've been increasingly learning thanks to the work that we are doing with Sisters Advocating Globally. Thank you, Eleonora and Giulia. I see another question. And so basing on the question, we can see if we want, if we can answer.
Yes, it's me.
Oui, merci. Je ne sais pas si je me fais entendre.
Oui?
Oui, oui. Oui, je suis.
May I ask a question? My name is Sister Aline. I'm a member of the congregation of the sisters serving the Holy Heart of Mary, and I'm connected from Cameroon. I have a question. I'm in charge of the pastoral of vocations ministry, and I'd like to, I don't know, I would like to understand what is your secrets for good communication in order to reach out to young people, because I'm on Facebook, on social media. I publish posts, but I'm here listening to you because I want to be formed to a good communication, how to convey this message to young people, to suggest them to be involved. Thank you very much. We're going to organize a webinar on this issue, but this is not the issue at stake today. But thank you very much, because we are really aware of the importance of this.
Bene, io veramente voglio ringraziare con tutto il cuore Eleonora e Giulia
Thank
perché
you very much. I would like to heartily thank Giulia and Eleonora. They are very busy in their schedules, but they really found time to share their expertise with us. Thank you so much. So have a nice day. Have a nice work in your mission in advocacy. We put in the chat the link to our website. And so if you want, our participants may be updated in our work and in your work. So we are coming to a close. I would like to give the floor to Therese, who is going to talk about, here is Therese, and she is going to, here I am. So thank you again to Giulia and Eleonora.
So the next webinar, always as a run-up to our next November conference. Our next webinar will be held on June 27th on rereading vows in the light of digital culture. It is to be audacious and simple, so we're waiting for you, always at the same hour, on June 27th from 2 to 3:30 in the afternoon p.m. So we are going to open for you to get registered. Thank you very much, Therese.
Anche di organizzare qualcosa proprio sul tema che sollevava la sorella dal Camerun, sul tema della
also talking about youth pastoral and vocational pastoral. This is something that we will work and reflect upon. And if you have sisters who have good best practices to share with us, please put them in contact with us so that we may include these contents. So let's come to a close. And as I said at the beginning, some minutes before we started our webinar, a document in the press office of the Vatican was presented, and that was an official document of the Vatican for the Dicastery of Communication concerning communication. My colleague here is putting in the chat, but I would like to share the website with you because it is really very interesting. The document is already available in
5 lingue, come
I believe in 5 languages, as you can see here.
sta sul
So
sito
the official document is here on the Vatican website. Teresa, I'm going to close your microphone. Now, this is the Vatican website where you can find the document in 5 languages, but this is the website that has been created for this project, because this project is not just a document, but it is a wider project fully entitled as Fully Present, a pastoral reflection concerning involvement with social media. This has been presented just today, and I really want to invite you to read it, to ponder about it, because if the Vatican is taking on such initiative, it means that this is a crucial event and topic. On the website, you may also interact and include our documents or your experiences. So now we are going really to close our event. So heartily thank you to our interpreters and participants. And because you all accompanied us in our communication, we have been very busy over these few days to draft a first copy, a first version of our international meeting. Some of you may receive an invitation to reflect on this program and to give us some feedbacks. We will send it to some people responsible for communication who we have in our database. If you receive such a message from the Libera, which is our platform for collective intelligence, we kindly ask you to participate and answer, because as we already told you, the program for the International Conference on Religious Communication is something that we have been working on in a shared way. So microphones are open. So thank you again to Giulia and Eleonora. Thank you to Sister Teresa Navoca for your support. Thank you very much. And good evening. Have a nice day. Good night, depending on where you are. Thank you very much.
Che non lo vediamo,
And
ma
thank you to Gianluca, who we can't see, but he is behind the scenes working for the internet, the recording, and so on. Thank you so much.
Grazie.
Thank you. Thank you.
Muy buenas.
Thank you so much.
Merci, merci.